Mother Knows Death, starring Nicole and Jemmy and Maria QK.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mother Knows Death. Boy, we've had some breaking news stories over the weekend. So many of them that we thought we couldn't even wait until tomorrow's episode. So we're just going to have a quick little episode this morning going over some of the major breaking news stories that happened this weekend. Of course, the most shocking being of Rob and Michelle Reiner. But first, let's talk about what happened before all of that happened yesterday. There were two shootings over the weekend, one in America, one in Australia, that were pretty significant.
All right, so these two shootings, I just can't even believe what happened over this weekend, seriously. It was like a never-ending news cycle. You know, I was doing the stories for this week too, like changing all the titles and stuff, and we have over 55 in there right now for this week.
Yeah, and I didn't even really look for any yet. So obviously we tell you guys all the time that in the Gross Room we cover the other stories that we don't talk about on Mother Knows Death. All right, let's talk about the shootings first, and then we'll talk about what happened last night, because that was crazy. But the stories with the shootings are also crazy.
All right, so we had these two major mass shootings over the weekend. So there was one at Brown University, which ended up killing, as of now, they're reporting 2 students have died. So last night, there was reports that they had taken a person of interest into custody, but they have since let them go. And one of the craziest parts of this story for me is that 2 of the students who were at the school that day, this was not their first shooting. One of the girls was shot in a 2021 shooting outside of Los Angeles at a high school, and another student was at a school adjacent to the Parkland High School during that shooting in Florida.
Well, I think that this is going to become more common because most people, I mean, I know older people go to college as well, but the majority of people that are at college, especially living there, are younger people, right? So the chances of them experiencing this in their school life, just because there are so many school shootings every year, are just increasing as time goes on. That case in particular, I mean, listen, like I don't want to talk shit because I'm not, obviously I've never worked in law enforcement and stuff, but just being an average lay person that's just watching the news and watching how the investigation's unfolding, it just seems like it's a total shit show. And I was actually, so my kids, as you guys know, that I was posting on Instagram yesterday, it snowed here, like, I mean, 6 inches. It's not that much compared to people that live up north, but like, it's kind of a lot here for, especially in December. So my kids had a 2-hour delay for school today, which means that I let them stay up later last night. So I was just up later than I normally would be, like listening to the news and paying attention to things. And I saw that they were having a press conference for this Brown University thing. And I guess I was shocked because all day, if you tuned into Fox News or to CNN or anything like that, they weren't naming who the shooter was that they had in custody. However, when you're on social media, this guy's picture was all over social media talking about, oh, it was this 24-year-old guy from Wisconsin, and I think it said that he was in the military, and his picture was plastered all over. And I thought, that's weird that someone leaked his name, obviously. Every single person on social media, it's like spreading like wildfire, and none of the news outlets are actually reporting this guy's name. So I thought that was a little weird. And then I tune into this press conference, and I was shocked when they said, oh, we let the guy go, and we really just don't have this person in custody. And so now everyone that lives around there is like, oh, cool. So there's just this crazy gunman on the loose. And now it's been days. So who knows if he's even around there anymore, or if he's in our neighborhood or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, and then they just released the footage, and there's barely any footage. The reporters are actually really calling out everyone, which is kind of awesome because you don't see that often.
Well, yeah, and they're smart not reporting that person's name immediately, because if it really wasn't that person, then press could have a serious lawsuit on their hands because
listen,
you're going to ruin that person's life.
Someone should definitely get in trouble. Now, I don't want to say 100% because just because they let this guy go, I mean, I don't understand how they just were so off, but whatever. They let this guy go. It doesn't 100% mean that he's not involved. It just means they don't have anything to hold him. But I'd still say whoever leaked it, and I mean, yes, this guy is a young guy, and they leaked his picture, his name, all his information, his parents' name, everything all over online. How is he going to recover from that, even if it turns out that he was completely not involved? It's just really unfortunate. And I mean, that's just going to be the way it is from now on, and we're going to have to get used to that. And I guess the same could be said with all of the stories that we're going to talk about today, honestly, because social media, I found out so many things to the point where you're just like, why am I even watching the news anymore? I'm hearing all this shit online, like sometimes hours before the news even releases it.
Yeah, but that's difficult because, like, for example, like sometimes we'll see something on Instagram, X, Facebook, right? And we'll throw it in the stories. And then when I start looking for anything backing it up, there's nothing. And then it turns out some of them are just completely fabricated. And what you were just saying reminds me of when that person, I believe on TikTok, was falsely accusing a professor at either Washington State University or Idaho, where the kids were killed, of being the suspect, right? And it's like that professor ended up suing that person, and they had every right because they had no credible claims backing that up. And now this person's all over with all these crazy online sleuths, and their life is getting ruined for no reason.
Well, even right as us recording this episode, I have gone on social media and see posts still circulating with the picture of the other guy saying that the shooter from the Brown University has been caught. And I'm just like, I don't understand why every single influencer in the world isn't taking that down now, because it's been known that he's not the guy anymore. But at the same time, some of these posts have millions of views, and maybe they're getting money from them, so they have no interest in taking them down.
Yeah, and like the news might be slow, but it's because they have, not that they're perfect either, because they definitely mess stuff up too, but they have a more credible system of fact checking and getting credible sources, whereas people anymore online are just posting whatever they see, and then there's like no accountability for damaging somebody's reputation.
All right, so yeah, I mean, you're right about that. And anyway, with this case, I mean, we'll stay on top of this more, and this is like, I want to focus most today on the Rob and Michelle Reiner case, but yeah, I don't know. I just watched this press conference last night, and I just can't believe. I almost feel like these people just like don't have practice in what happens in an emergency or something. It just seems all over the place, and I just keep thinking, like, if my kid was at school there, how I just would not feel safe. Like, they're putting out some statement like, oh, well, the shelter in place thing is lifted because ever since that initial call that we got, there hasn't been any threats to the public. And you're just like, yeah, but there were no threats to the public when a guy walked in a classroom and shot a bunch of people and killed a bunch of people. So, like, your argument is weak, and I understand that you're in a hard place because you don't want the public to be panicking, because you have a whole entire area where not only the universities but just people who live nearby go to school, send their kids to school around there, go to work around there. And as of right now, we don't even know. I mean, obviously it was targeted, right? You don't just go in a specific university in a specific classroom and kill specific people. But yeah, like, what was the motivation of that? Was it a boyfriend killing a girlfriend and it was a domestic situation? Or was it like a racial or politically moved thing? Like who's the target and who needs to be worried right now?
Well, yeah, because who's to say, like, it's very busy out right now. It's the holidays. People are doing more stuff out there, going shopping. Like, what's to say this person's not going to go out in public and do it somewhere else if they got so much satisfaction from that and weren't caught?
Yeah, I really don't know. It's just, And to think about, and listen, like the police could totally be lying and telling us that this is the only video that they have. But in my opinion, if they don't have a suspect right now and they don't have, they need the public's help to show pictures so the public could be like, we know who this guy is. So it would be the best for them to show all of the available evidence they have.
Yeah, but I do want to play devil's advocate with that for a second, because I do think sometimes they are so pressured to release information and then things start happening, like you're ruining a person's life that actually has nothing to do with it, or you're compromising the integrity of the case when they should be keeping some stuff close to their chest.
Just based upon, though, the press conference, and I could only go upon what they've said directly, like it seems like they legitimately have no other film of this guy. And I mean, they post that online and the comments are just they're so good, that just like ripping these people. One of them showed the little, when you go to like the men's or the women's room and there's the outline of the man or the outline of the woman. Mm-hmm. They showed the outline of the man just in black, and they were like, oh, this is the suspect at large, because that's like the amount of information they're giving us, a figure of a person wearing black. Like it's so, it's just like, yeah, that's really helpful. So they're going to have to find them other ways, obviously. And this first one, they were saying that they found through tracking cell phone records and things like that. And then they were saying that they found this guy and they found these guns and he was in some hotel. So you're just like, okay, well, is that the same guy? Like what, or is that just another guy that's in a hotel with a bunch of guns that I have no idea. So, and listen, like tomorrow's another day. So there might be a ton more information about that. And I'm texting, last night, it's late. I'm texting you and Lauren and being like, dude, what is happening right now? This is such a shit show. And then all of a sudden, this breaking news comes out about Rob and Michelle Reiner, and which was really shocking. So I guess before we get into that, just briefly, let's talk about the terror. It was a terrorist attack that happened in Australia too, which is unusual because they are a country with some of the strictest gun laws in the entire world.
Well, what's really weird about this case too is it was a father and son pair of gunmen too, so it wasn't even a lone shooter, but they ended up killing 15 people during this Hanukkah celebration at Bondi Beach in Sydney, and at least 42 people have been hospitalized as of what we know right now. But the police killed the father, who was 50, on the scene, and then the son, who was 24, is now hospitalized. So I wonder if he's going to give the motive. I mean, clearly they were attacking a specific group of people, but I wonder what other information he's going to offer about this.
Yeah, and it's and talking about the strict gun laws, like if you compare it to our country, it's like, when you think about some of the states that have strict gun laws, like when you're in Texas, for example, you could legally, openly carry a gun in some areas, and it's not very difficult to get one. Whereas in New Jersey, it's one of the harder states to get one. So in Australia, it's not like I guess right now, if we go over to Pennsylvania or Texas, you could just walk in a store and buy a gun, like in Walmart or something, right? But in New Jersey, it's not that easy, and it's the same in Australia. Like you have to get a license and you have to specifically go through a lot of hoops to get a gun, and I personally believe that is a reason why their gun crime is low, because they are very strict of who has to get it. And sometimes if a person wants to commit a crime impulsively, they have to go through hoops and months of paperwork and money and a process to get it. And that would take too much time for an impulsive action. You can't just go to the store and buy one easily like that, right? But this dad actually had legal permits to have these firearms for whatever reason that he was granted them. And just by watching the video, they both know how to shoot guns and they both know what the hell they're doing. And I guess the negative of this in a place like Australia is that no one has guns. Therefore, those people were just shooting people, targets, for over 10, 11 minutes because no one's armed there.
But there was that viral video, right, of somebody taking down one of the gunmen.
which was actually so brave, and
that person is such a hero.
Yeah, I mean, just so brave to do that. And he's in the hospital. He got shot. I think he didn't. I'm not sure that he even realized if there was another gunman or not, but there's some videos circulating online that are over 10 minutes long that just show these people with a bolt action rifle just shooting and shooting and shooting, with just like not even caring to take the time to do it because they know that nobody's shooting back at them. It's so scary. So yeah, and I mean, like, children, it's just disgusting. And like, listen, you're never even going to be able to get into the mind of a person that wants to do something like that. But it's even, like you were saying earlier, it's just more disturbing that this is a father-son situation. We always talk about that. Like, how do you understand one person being sick, but how do two people that think that way get together and have those thoughts and decide to carry it out? There's like not one person saying like, maybe this isn't a good idea or whatever. It's just it's just weird. You think like, how does that conversation even come up?
Well, I even understand it more in this situation because it's a father-son, so you don't know how this kid was raised, if he was radicalized from the time he was a little kid, right? But I think that more applies.
His mom was interviewed and said he was a good boy and anybody would love to have a son like hers.
Well, anyone's gonna.
She's one of those moms.
Yes, listen, that could very well be true, or there's also, I would like to argue, more than not toxic boy moms that say that all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think that applies with, like on YouTube Live over on Friday, we were talking about this like crazy international satanic cult that was taking these horrific videos of children, and it was not just, I think it was in Australia too, but there was also another situation in the United States where all these guys were spread around. And in that case, I'm like, how are these people meeting up between like New Mexico, California, New York, and then forming this really terrible internet behavior? I just don't understand it.
Yeah, I don't either. So obviously if more comes out on that, at least in this case, they know who the people are, and they're going to have to trace it back and figure what happened. It's just really unfortunate. Like, I mean, like, what else do you have to say? This is like, I feel like this, and we don't even talk about all of them that happened, but it just so happens that this was like bang, bang, bang. So yeah, so yesterday, so now, I just had listened to the press conference on the Brown University thing and was just like, oh my God, like, what is happening with these police and these press conferences and stuff? And then I hear, oh, there's going to be one on Rob and Michelle Reiner. So first it came out that there was an emergency call. I guess the paramedics or the fire department were called to Rob and Michelle Reiner's house. And then the fire department had called the police to come. So clearly they saw something that they thought the police needed to be involved. And they weren't releasing their names at first, but they were saying that the victims were there were two people who were dead, and one was 68 and one was 78, which just so happened to be their ages, and they were the homeowners of the house. I don't know why, and maybe and we could talk about this a little bit more in a minute about Gene Hackman's situation. My first thought wasn't that they were murdered. I don't know why. Like, I found it to just be like a little shocking when the press conference, right before the press conference happened on the news, they were talking to a reporter on the ground, and she had said that they were stabbed to death. And I was like, oh shit. Like,
well, I think too with Gene Hackman, and I always think of Bob Saget, like, they were just these weird things that happened, but everybody was so convinced there was a crime behind it. And even still, we have all the autopsy reports and the investigation and everything, and people are just like, yeah, I'm not buying it, something else happened. And it's like, no, celebrities are normal people too, and things happen to them. But yeah, this was incredibly surprising. I understand why, even though it was so obvious it was them, why they might not want to release that information immediately, because maybe they hadn't notified everybody in the family yet. But it's just really sad because it seems like their daughter went to their house in the afternoon and found them like that, and that's who placed the call. And then we actually wrote this up as our dissection today, but the reports coming out now are that she immediately told the police that her brother should be a person of interest and that he was dangerous. And her brother Nick has now been arrested. He is in custody and being held on $4 million bail.
If you were like the number one suspect in a double homicide, why is there a bail? Why?
Well, we ask this all the time, and I think somebody on YouTube actually worked in the field, and they said that some states, that's just the way the law is. Like, there's always bail, depending where you live.
And obviously, for a regular person, $4 million bail is like, okay, that's so astronomical. Nobody will ever be able to come up with that. But when your father is estimated to be worth over $200 million, and it's probably way more than that, to be honest. Like, Rob Reiner is like,
he made some of the most famous
A-list
movies.
Yes, he's like at the top of the line of A-list celebrity elite. Like, he's probably worth so much more money. But like, so $4 million is like $4,000 to regular people. Like, it's still a lot of money, but like not really in the grand scheme of things. So that's just one thing that's kind of, I mean, assuming he doesn't have access to that probably, and I'm sure if his siblings think that he killed their parents, they're not giving him the money to get out. But still, it's just like, it's still a possibility, which I don't like, because clearly, like, let's just say theoretically, he could come up with the money, so he's allowed to get out when clearly he's unwell.
Well, yeah, and now all this information's coming out that he had drug addiction issues since he was a teenager. He's 32 now, so he had drug addiction issues since he was a teenager, and he had experienced bouts of homelessness. I guess I didn't read too much into this, but what I was gathering was that they tried everything in their power to put him in rehab and everything, but sometimes he wouldn't go to the facilities, so instead he just chose homelessness over that. And then this eerie clip is resurfacing of, I guess, when he recovered at some point about 10 years ago, he and Rob Reiner, his dad, co-wrote a movie that was semi-autobiographical about his issues. And this interview is resurfacing where they're talking about their rocky relationship. And now when you put it into perspective of I guess he's not convicted yet, so we have to say he allegedly killed them, right? It's just really disturbing to think about. And when you look at pictures of this guy and videos of him talking, he's just like not home, and it's very eerie.
He is like creepy as hell, honestly. Like, you're looking at it and you're just like, yeah, this guy like looks unstable. And the fact that the sister had said that he's dangerous, it's like, oh, they've been having issues with this guy for a while. And we always talk about that, like when someone's murdered and the police will call. Remember when we were talking about the Jodi Arias trial, and Travis Alexander, her ex-boyfriend, was found dead, and the police went to his family and his friends and were like, do you know anybody that would have wanted to hurt him? And every one of them was like, Jodi.
Yeah.
There's like, the daughter was probably like, I know who did this, without even knowing who did this. Because I mean, Rob Reiner's like, I know that he's sometimes, he's a little bit controversial with his politics or whatever, but like, I feel like he's like a beloved figure in Hollywood, and you wouldn't really think that a person of his means and everything, that anybody would even have access to get into his home to kill him like that. But it makes sense, obviously, that it was his kid.
Well, yeah, and then there's, yeah, I completely agree with you on that. And then there's like all this drama over the search warrant they're trying to get. And our friend Joe Jackalone posted a video trying to explain it and was saying like sometimes it could be an issue if the person of interest lives inside of the home where the crime occurred, right? So you have to wonder, was he living with them at that time? I mean, even just the night before, Saturday night, they were at Conan O'Brien's holiday party and they were seen arguing.
Well, listen, I think the more and more time that goes on in all these cases, and especially with things getting leaked to social media so easily and stuff, I do understand that police forces want to like check boxes extra at this time, because if you think about it, like just last week talking about what was going on with Luigi Mangione and stuff, and their defense is trying to get them to drop a lot of evidence because they were saying a lot of it was found with an improper search warrant and stuff. That's the kind of stuff that scares police departments to be like, you know what, we're just going to take this extra time to do this to cover our ass because we don't need to lose this case because we didn't collect the evidence properly, right?
Oh, totally.
So that makes sense. So let's talk about so then the police do this press conference, and they don't say anything, which is so bizarre, because before I was listening to that press conference, I had already seen that People magazine said from a reliable source that it was in fact Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle who were dead. It was a double homicide and their son had killed them. Right? So they're reporting that in print. People magazine, like, really, I mean, I don't think that they're like the cream of the crop news source, but at the same time, they also are pretty legit, and they have to cover their ass, and they wouldn't put that out there if it wasn't true, right? So they have like a very reliable source that was telling them that. And then they do this press conference with the cops. The cops won't say if it was a homicide. They won't say it was Rob Reiner and his wife, even though the reporters had cited the People magazine article. And one of them said, the mayor of Los Angeles just put out a tweet about Rob Reiner and his wife being dead. You can't confirm that? And he's like, no. It was like, dude, it was out of control. And that's why I was texting you like, yo, you are missing this. Like, wake up. Like, we have a lot to talk about tomorrow.
I guess like my new pregnancy bedtime at 9 p.m. is not good for freaking
news. Oh my God.
news.
I was like, what is happening right now? And this was like 5 minutes after the Brown University press conference. I was just so overwhelmed. I couldn't sleep because I was like, oh my God, this is so like crazy and exciting at the same time. Like, it just was crazy. The police also wouldn't say, they were like, you're not getting that information until the coroner goes in and identifies the bodies. You will get that directly from the coroner. They wouldn't say anything about that it being a homicide. They wouldn't say anything. So one thing that I wanted to bring up was that it was interesting that they said that the coroner wasn't there yet. So when they were doing that press conference at around midnight our time, the bodies were still in the house. And I believe that this crime occurred in the afternoon.
Yeah, they were found at like 3:30.
So, and he was saying that he didn't know when the coroner was about to get there or if they were there yet. Like, there was all this stuff. So that was one thing that I wanted to talk about today on this episode, because a lot of people, I guess, assume that a coroner or a medical examiner goes to every single scene, and in fact that's not correct. So it all over the country there's either a medical examiner system or a coroner system, which are different, and we talk a lot about those differences in the gross room. But basically, if you think about it, so many people die in the United States every single day. It would be impossible for the coroner or the medical examiner to go to every single crime scene and look at it. So that's why they have a whole entire staff of people like our friend Joseph Scott Morgan, who are forensic investigators, and they go out to the scene. They're the ones that go, they document evidence, take photographs, interview witnesses, gather medical history and all that kind of stuff. And they're kind of like the eyes and the ears for the medical examiner, and then they go back and show their findings to the medical examiner so they could help complete the case. But for example, in Philadelphia, the medical examiner never left the morgue, only to go to very high profile cases, one of which I recall was when the Amtrak train derailed in Philadelphia, and that's when they would go to the scene because that was going to be a huge case. So something like one of the most Hollywood elites getting murdered is up there with, okay, the coroner's going to get in a car and go to the scene, right? Because this is like a huge deal. So I'm assuming that's why they were waiting for them to get there. I'm sure that there were already investigators there. Just the actual like doctor who was going to be signing out the case was still waiting to go there, perhaps. Just because they really, like I said, they really want to cover their ass and stuff. So, let's talk a little bit about, because I guess I was saying, you know, whenever you hear of two people dying together, there's all different situations. As Maria was saying earlier, when we were talking about Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa, obviously everybody in the media first went to like, oh, this is suspicious and this is a murder, when in my mind I was thinking other things, because there's lots of different things that could happen. Of course, in the case of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa, they were actually both deemed to be natural deaths. If you recall, Betsy died from the rare hantavirus and was the primary caregiver of Gene Hackman, who was elderly and living with dementia. So after she died, he didn't have a caregiver, and then he subsequently died. So in that case, they were both ruled natural. But there are other cases where two bodies are discovered together, and it could be something like an accidental death, like they died from carbon monoxide exposure. It could be suicidal deaths, like they both decided to kill themselves together, or they had a murder-suicide. Or it could be like in this case, which is a homicide. So there's all different sorts of scenarios that could happen when two people are found dead together.
Yeah. I also wanted to say, too, with the coroner thing you were talking about, like, I feel like that episode we did about Thomas Noguchi, you really see that in his book, like, all the crimes he would go to, because he really talked about that process.
Yeah, and the thing is, though, is Thomas Noguchi's a good example. Like, he did RFK's autopsy, Marilyn Monroe, all of these...
Sharon Tate.
Sharon Tate, and what's her name? Natalie Wood, right?
Mm-hmm.
Huge cases that's when the coroner would go to the scene, but he didn't go on the average Joe that got shot on the street. Like, trust me, they don't go to every single one. So just like high profile cases, it just so happens when you're in LA, I mean, there's just a higher probability of there being more high profile cases. So I guess first let's start with, I do want to talk about, like, once they take the bodies to the morgue, what are they going to look for, and how are they going to determine what happened? So we haven't had exact a release of specific manner of death and cause of death from the LA coroner's office as of this point. So all of this is just reporting, and as we know, reporters get it wrong a lot of the times. So as of right now, we're treating it as a homicide that was sharp injuries, cut their throats. But there's just so many other things to look for at autopsy. So first, let's talk about, they're going to look for evidence of trauma, obviously. And TMZ reports, so you know how people say, oh, this is someone died of a cardiac arrest, right? I actually saw someone posted online that showed a screenshot from the police and fire department have I should know this because I'm married to a firefighter. Whatever that system is that beeps on my husband's phone all day.
Please, and you can't even ask him because you don't have 4 hours of your life for him to explain it.
Yes, it's just a huge joke in our house because I always tell him that it needs to be turned off when he's home because he's not at work anore. That listening to the radio or whatever. The dispatch, yeah. So they show a screenshot of it that shows that the Los Angeles Fire Department reported to Rob Reiner and Michelle Reiner's house for a cardiac arrest. Okay, so yeah, obviously they got stabbed to death, so their heart stopped. Yeah, okay, thanks for that information.
Do you think they possibly say that as like code word?
Well, no, I don't think it's a code word. I just think that,
or like it's just such a it's like a generalized term for like a dead person.
The daughter called and is like, oh my God, like I just got to my parents' house and both of my parents are dead. Like so they just say, you know, the daughter's not doing an autopsy external exam on the people. She doesn't know how they died. They just know two people are down and they're probably dead. Their heart stopped. Like,
well, yeah, maybe that's what I'm trying to say. Like, maybe they're saying it in the proper generalized term of like there's 2 dead people at this house, but they don't want to be.
And cardiac arrest doesn't. I mean, technically, it means your heart stopped, but people can be revived from cardiac arrest. You know, so it's like it's just like the dispatch doesn't know. They don't know. So all they do is they know 2 people are down, and it's like the ambulance needs to get there quick because they might have to either try to resuscitate them or analyze what's happening. Like someone's in great danger, basically, right? So this is my second most hated terminology that media uses. So TMZ. Rob and Michelle suffered lacerations consistent with knife wounds, and LAPD's Robbery Homicide Division is investigating the case. Okay? So in the gross room, as Maria said earlier, we did a high-profile or celebrity death dissection on Rob Reiner and Michelle Reiner today with as much information as we have, going over all the stuff we'll be talking to you about on the episode. So you can really see pictures of autopsies to see like what this stuff actually looks like. And a laceration is caused by blunt trauma, like a baseball bat. It's not caused by a knife. They should use terms like Rob and Michelle suffered sharp force injuries or Rob and Michelle suffered incisional wounds. Like, I understand the word laceration sounds gorier and it sounds cooler, but like it's wrong. Stop using it. You sound like a freaking moron. It drives me crazy. So then I go into this post talking about stab wounds and what they look like and why they have a very specific appearance. And then we go through in this post every single thing that they're going to be looking for at autopsy, as long as like what these things actually look like. So what did the blade look like? What kind of knife was used? Was the same knife used for all of the injuries? How many stab wounds were there? Was it overkill? There is so overkill in homicides is defined as a massive amount of injuries that far exceed what is needed to kill a person. So is that a possibility here? Yeah. Because they're seen in cases with family, high levels of betrayal, anger, jealousy, domestics. So there is a possibility that there's signs of overkill. 14% of cases of homicides have overkill in them, and they're very gruesome in nature. So it would be, it wouldn't be out of the question, in my opinion. And then we go through like, okay, so we know we're saying that they have some stab wounds, right? Which one caused their death? Because sometimes, like, let's say a person's stabbed 30 times. They're not going to have 30 things that would have been a way to kill them. Usually it's like there's a lot of superficial ones. That's why you're stabbing a moving target. They're moving. You're not hitting an artery and causing them to go down. So you're just stabbing wherever you're going, and most of the time people that are doing this, they don't really know anatomy, so they don't know the best place to go to get a person down the quickest and things like that. And then you have to think that people are fighting back, so you're going to look at their hands to see if there's defense wounds and if they put up a fight. So what stab wounds caused their death? Non-fatal stab wounds. So for instance, I show an example of like what it looks like if there's a stab wound to the stomach, right? And yes, eventually a stab wound to the stomach that was open and pouring gastric contents into the abdominal cavity would eventually cause someone a lot of problems and could cause infection and sepsis that would lead to death. But that's nothing that's happening super quick that the person's just going to drop dead from. So you're going to see a lot of injuries. Of another one I showed is a person that has this large incisional wound across their head that you could see their skull exposed. And although it looks very gruesome, it wouldn't cause a person to die on the scene like that. So you're going to have to look for what was the wound that actually caused the person to die. And for example, that would be a stab wound to the heart, and obviously getting sliced across the carotid arteries of the neck. Now, there's been times where people have been stabbed to death and then had their throat cut after they were already dead. So, and that would be seen in more cases of overkill, that you would that you would see more stab wounds occurred after the person was already clearly dead and not fighting back anymore. So when we talk about neck wounds, and if this is true, if they were sliced across the neck, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what killed them, because you could have a fatal neck wound and you could have a non-fatal neck wound. And I show the difference between them in this post. When you're talking about your neck anatomy, when you feel the front of it, especially on a man where the Adam's apple is, that's the larynx or the windpipe. Right behind that is the esophagus, and then right next to either of those structures is the carotid arteries and the jugular veins. The arteries, of course, if they get cut, that's going to be really what causes a person to die and to bleed out for two different reasons. Number one, the carotid arteries are major arteries that come directly off of the aorta. They're very close to the pump of the heart. So blood is going to be coming out of that hole more forcefully just because the pump is right there. And then the second mechanism of death in that particular case is that those arteries are also bringing oxygenated blood to your brain. So if you're cutting off that line of the oxygen getting to your brain, that could also cause death very quickly for both of them. A jugular vein a vein in general is a little bit of a slower bleed, so you could possibly survive something like that if you're brought to the hospital right away. Carotid injury like that, like you're dying from that. It's a very fatal wound. And then of course I reference in this post Nicole Brown Simpson because, as you guys remember, whoever killed her or didn't kill her, she was nearly decapitated. So the knife went so far back to her neck that it actually nicked and severed a portion of her spinal cord, which could also cause death as well. So the deeper that you go in a throat wound at the right angle could kill someone either by the carotid arteries or by the spinal cord. But then in this post, I show another really gnarly neck wound. If you remember, one of our Gross Room members and also listeners of this program had sent us in a case of her daughter. I think we did it on a 6 Shocking Stories episode. Her daughter had fell on a can.
Oh, yeah.
And the lid of the can is a sharp, it's essentially a knife, right? When you open a can, she fell on it somehow in a weird accident, and it sliced a huge gash in her neck. But luckily, it didn't hit any of her blood vessels or her spinal cord. It didn't go that deep. So even when you look at the neck wound, it's very gnarly, but it didn't cause an injury that would have killed her. So that's all different things that they're going to be looking for during this autopsy. They're also going to be looking for post-mortem stab wounds. So that means like I said earlier, after the person's dead, that they were still getting stabbed. And another thing to take into consideration is that they're going to be looking for other wounds too. So as Maria was saying, they were at Conan O'Brien's, you've said this, right?
Yeah.
Okay, they were at Conan O'Brien's holiday party, and they were fighting with their son. I guess I'm assuming that means arguing. But when they went home, did that fight continue, and did it turn into a fist fight before it turned into this? Or another type of fight? They could have been beaten with an object or something like that. So they're going to look for evidence of blunt injuries. Now we could talk about they might have seen lacerations, their favorite word. Also broken bones, contusions or bruises and things like that. And in here I show a case of a person that did have multiple stab wounds, but they also had evidence that they were strangled as well. So there can definitely be two different mechanisms of injury in these cases. They're also going to look at toxicology just to see if Rob and his wife were under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Although I feel like who cares? You know,
yeah,
I mean,
if he was
like,
going to murder them, what's the difference?
The thing is, though, is that they would use that in court when the son's crying, like, oh, they were alcoholics and they were mentally abusive, you know, whatever. They use that information for that, because sometimes that's contributory. I don't see how it would be in this case, but they also want to check to make sure that like, let's say, for example, they do these autopsies and they don't see any defensive wounds, then they might say, well, that's weird. Why weren't they fighting back? Oh, they were drugged before they were stabbed. And all of this stuff, like, really doesn't, it matters more for the court case, rather than just, like, for actually saying that they were just innocent people that got stabbed to death. And then lastly, they're going to look for evidence of natural disease. Usually if they're in there, they're just going to look anyway, and they're going to weigh the heart, see how much it weighed, if there was any evidence of like heart disease, look for any tumors and things like that. Obviously, like at this point, those things are non-contributory, but sometimes they are. So in cases of a person, like let's say a person's driving their car and they get in a car accident, and then a lot of people say, well, why would you even do an autopsy? You know, they died as a result of the car accident. But then sometimes you do the autopsy and you open up the brain and you see that they have a tumor, and then you're like, oh, well, maybe that brain tumor was actually the reason that caused them to have this car accident or a heart attack or something like that. So sometimes natural disease is contributory in forensic cases, but in this particular one, I don't think it's going to be contributory at all.
No, I mean, this is already, what has it been? Not even 24 hours, and this is already so much information.
Yeah, and I mean, like, we're going to hear more for sure, and it's just, you know, it's just really unfortunate, because when you watch, and we have all this linked in the post in the gross room as well, but when you watch this interview with the son, you just think, like, they're being open in this interview about the struggles, but nobody really truly understands the struggles that people are going through behind closed doors. And obviously, being such a public, well-liked, well-respected Hollywood figure, they don't air nowhere near all their dirty laundry. And I just keep thinking, like, this daughter, just what the other children who are more living through this as well their whole life have been dealing with this with their brother, only for it to end like this is just, it's just like such a huge weight on your heart. You know, I used to work with a woman who had a daughter, closely with a woman who had a daughter who had a heroin addiction, and I mean, it really, really, really destroyed her for years. It was just constant, like, just not hearing from her daughter for days, never knowing when she was getting that call. And then she finally got that call that she was dead. And honestly, she told me she was relieved. Like, that's terrible to think about your child, but like, I mean, like, it's so much when there's someone like that's so volatile in your family like that. And to think that they have to, I mean, your parents both dying at the same time is just terrible anyway. Your parents getting murdered is terrible anyway. But to think that your brother did it is just like...
Well, and they're not normal people either. So, like, this isn't going away anytime soon. And I doubt they're going to be able to grieve in private at all.
And I mean, and it seems like, I mean, Billy Crystal was outside of the house, Larry David, like huge stars, just, and listen, like, anybody that's close friends with these people are probably not surprised if they really know what's been going on in their life, because I think the sister's words of saying that he was dangerous makes me think that there's been threats before, and there's been situations before that they have been keeping private.
Oh, totally.
So I think that's all for today. We can obviously, like, it's the afternoon on Monday, and by tomorrow, who knows what else we'll know about this case, and maybe we'll briefly discuss it again, but we just couldn't wait until tomorrow to get you this news. No,
and just really quick to wrap this episode up, the crazy news weekend didn't end there, because Brian
like, exactly. I'm like,
you're like, you're wrapping up. I'm like, we have a whole other thing we could cover.
I seriously totally texted Maria today, the Morton Salt girl, like, when it rains, it pours. It's just to think about everything that's happened in the past 24 or so hours is just out of control.
All right, so I don't think we've covered this case on here at all. I don't remember if we talked about it when it first happened, but I don't think so.
I thought we did, because we did actually, because we talked about his text messages.
Well, we talked about him on the YouTube live, but I don't think we did it on this show.
Okay, so
just really quick, because like we will be covering this more at length, especially in the gross room. We're going to do a whole dissection on it too. But this guy, Brian Walshe, was just on trial for the murder and dismemberment of his wife, who was last seen on New Year's Eve in 2022. So they're thinking she died New Year's Day 2023. So her body was never found, and he's been on trial for her murder. They think he dumped her body in a nearby dumpster, which was nearly impossible to find. They didn't find anything. So he's been on trial for the past like couple weeks, and this morning he was found guilty.
Yeah, I mean, and like, listen, how are they not going to find this guy guilty? Obviously, he's guilty. I mean, who else goes to Lowe's and is on video buying
a hacksaw, a hatchet,
a
buckets, cleaner, and rags for $463
and a Tyvek suit,
a Tyvek suit. Yeah, and then other information came out that she was having an affair. Her life insurance policy was worth $500,000. They had 3 sons that were really young. It is extremely disturbing, this case, and I can't wait to line out all the details because it just gets even worse. Like, he had these terrible Google searches, one of which, for example, for shortness of this episode, is 10 ways to dispose of a dead body if you really need to. Okay, you're not guilty at all. He also was searching something to do with porn that had to do with affairs. But yeah, he was found guilty of first-degree murder this morning, and he's facing life in prison without parole, and his sentencing hearing is set for Wednesday morning.
Yeah, so we'll do a high-profile death dissection on this in the gross room at some point too, just because it's a little bit different with the Google searches are just like super interesting to me, and it's amazing to me that there's not some kind of system, I guess, that triggers that. But I also was saying in the gross room
we'd be in jail.
Yeah. I mean, but the thing is that I feel like it's quite obvious that we do this for a living, and some of my searches are because of that. Whereas if you just have a person that's just like searching for porn and searching for like how to get to Lowe's and things like that, and then all of a sudden they have searches about like how to get rid of a dead body, what to do with a dead body, this, that, and the other, you'd be like, okay, this is a little weird. Like, what does anybody want to do with this information? So, but I mean, that's the good and bad part of the internet, because sometimes, I mean, think about it. Like, sometimes you'll just be like sitting around with your friends and talking about something that's like really weird. And I mean, even when we went to dinner with our East Coast true crime family on Friday night, we saw our friend Barbara Butcher, and we were like, hey, we have a question. If somebody puts body parts into a dumpster, actually it was pertaining to this case, because he did say that he dismembered her body and put it in trash cans and it went into a dumpster. The problem is that they don't know what day it was. They don't know. There would just be no way to figure out like where all those dumpsters took the bodies and find the body parts in the landfill. But there are definitely cases of investigators going to landfill looking for body parts. So we said to Barbara, who we've interviewed on the show before, she has a true crime show on Oxygen channel.
The Death Investigator.
The Death Investigator, which is on Oxygen. And she just told me that it's streaming on Peacock as well. So we were like, hey, what happens if there's a body that gets put into a dumpster and it goes to a landfill? Like, who looks for that? Is that the cops? Is that the coroner's office? Like, what's happening there? And like, if we didn't see her that night, we could have Googled it. People are just curious about stuff like that. That doesn't mean that we're trying to kill somebody and put them in a dumpster and like, you know. But in this case, there's just so much evidence against him. So yeah, we'll and like, obviously if we hear more about that too, but tune into the gross room within the next, I would say, month or two, because we're going to do a deep dive on that and all of the investigation that they found, and how, because in that particular case, when they don't have a body and the defense was saying, oh, she died of natural causes, and I just was scared because, you know, she was having this affair and I thought you guys would think it was me. I just put her in the dumpster and cut her up. I mean, technically, he should only be getting charged with, how could they prove that he actually killed her when there's no body to see if that's true.
Well, we'll get into all that
Yeah,
because, like,
'cause that defense
it is ridiculous.
But guess what? Like, that defense worked in the Casey Anthony trial when they said, oh, she drowned in the pool and we just put her body, we freaked out and panicked and put her body in the woods. Like, when you could give reasonable doubt to a jury member that is the possibility that happened because you're not able to determine what the actual cause of death was.
Dumping a body and cutting up a body are kind of just, like, different. Because, like, you're taking the extra effort to totally dismember
But it
somebody.
doesn't matter. That's not that's not murdering somebody, though. You can get in trouble for, like, abuse of a corpse, but that's not the same charges as homicide.
No, but clearly they had enough circumstantial evidence, whereas the Casey Anthony case, there was enough reasonable doubt that they didn't charge her, even though it's like, come on. But
there was, yeah, I mean,
all
that
you
could
need
be
is-
that could be argued both ways because there was plenty of circumstantial evidence there.
but
too,
all
I
you
guess.
need is one person, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So, in this case, though, they just they weren't having it, and it's really sad because they had 3 little kids to the point where this happened 2 years ago, and some of them, if not all of them, might not even remember their parents even being together, let alone their mom being alive when they get older, because they're very, very young.
Well, we thought we were jumping on here for 15 minutes to talk, to update you guys about the weekend headlines because there was just so much. I mean, we just couldn't wait till tomorrow's episode. And not to mention, there's like 50 plus other stories that need to be talked about in the next week or two.
Yeah, lots of good stuff coming up. So we'll talk to you guys tomorrow.
We'll be back with normal episodes the rest of this week. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. So please head over to Apple or Spotify, leave us a review, subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you have stories, comments, or questions for us, please send them to stories@motherknowsdeath.com.
See you guys. Thank you for listening to Mother Knows Death. As a reminder, my training is as a pathologist assistant. I have a master's level education and specialize in anatomy and pathology education. I am not a doctor and I have not diagnosed or treated anyone, dead or alive, without the assistance of a licensed medical doctor. This show, my website, and social media accounts are designed to educate and inform people based on my experience working in pathology so they can make healthier decisions regarding their life and well-being. Always remember that science is changing every day, and the opinions expressed in this episode are based on my knowledge of those subjects at the time of publication. If you are having a medical problem, have a medical question, or are having a medical emergency, please contact your physician or visit an urgent care center, emergency room, or hospital. Please rate, review, and subscribe to Mother Knows Death on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere you get podcasts. Thanks.